everyone, I'm Luna Willows,
And I'm Jenna Pierce. We'd love to welcome you to our podcast, Flow of Ink.
which is a great place where we take our writing life day by day and our stories page by page.
So why don't you sit back, relax, and stay for a bit while we have a chat?
Welcome to episode 2, where we are going to discuss Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. And I am warning everyone that there is going to be major spoilers, major plot points that will be spilled here. So, we have warned you.
Yes.
Yes, I will start off by asking you this time, Jenna, since I went first last time.
Okay.
Which character did you like the best and the least, and why?
Well, for me, I think the best character was Sam Roth because he handles almost everything with patience and grace, except for when it comes to protecting the love of his life. And whenever someone does something wrong, he tries to put them in their place. So he is like my favorite character. Like I can relate to him in that sense of compass as far as that is concerned. As for my least favorite character, hands down, it's gonna be Jack
Oh,
because
yeah.
in the nicest way that I can say it, he's a meanie poo. I don't like what he does to Sam, which is when he locks Sam in a shed and he bites uh, Grace's best friend Olivia and turns her into a wolf. Like he's a meanie. I can't stand
Yes.
him.
No, he is, like, hands down, probably the number one villain of this book
Right, right, absolutely. At least so far, so far.
so far.
Um, There's another character that I am going to be watching out for in the coming books. It's Shelby.
Shelby, yep.
She is the white she-wolf of the book, and she's a little, what's the word I'm looking for, Luna?
I believe yesterday you used she witch.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. Yeah. Um, but if you guys read this book, you'll find out why.
Exactly.
What about you, Luna?
I Sam, hands down, is the favorite. He is the character that immediately draws you in. I feel like as as a woman, you're almost supposed to feel more for Grace and understand her side. But I felt much more related to Sam because of his shyness, his reservedness. Like, I have that a lot. So it's like I saw him and with how sweet he was, and I was just like, oh my gosh, loved him. From like the first chapter he's in, I loved it.
Yeah, he's a, I
Yeah.
love him.
Least favorite. That's difficult because I want to say Jack, but I'm actually going to say Grace's parents, who her father's name is Lewis, and they never really say an appropriate name for her mom. They just call her Rags. That's her nickname in the story. They're probably like my second least favorite because they are just completely not involved in their daughter's life. Like, if I have a child and my child almost dies because of a wolf attack, like, I'm not gonna be like, okay, have fun, raise yourself.
Right? Like that was crazy. Like I thought the same thing. I'm like, why don't they seem more involved? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, if we tried to hide, like, an adult boy in a room for, like, however long, our
Yeah,
parents are gonna find out.
I know.
Like, I don't think that it would stay hidden as long if it was in our case at all.
Right, absolutely. All right, so my turn to ask a question, and I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
So, was the book a quick read for you, or was it a slow burn? And if it was slow, was there a turning point where the book gained momentum?
Now, for this review, I have read the book twice. I have the ability to block the world out and read it just in one go. And that is exactly what I did. It was very quick for me. I timed myself just to see how long, not including sleep. I read it in 10 hours.
Are you serious? Wow.
Like, there is a turning point, like in the beginning when you first start reading. It does feel kind of slower, and that's because I think she's really trying to lay out like the history of both of them. But for me, the instant moment where I could not set it down was when he sees her in in the bookstore. Like,
Oh my gosh, that is my scene too.
yes,
That's crazy. That's my scene too.
yes.
I have
So,
to 100% at that part. And it's just like, okay, now you really piqued my interest now.
because you just want to yell at the characters and look up, look up, buy a book, see him, see his eyes, like just
Oh,
do it.
gorgeous yellow, sunny, golden eyes. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah, exactly. But what about you? Was it like quick or slow for you?
Oh, I could have read the book in an entire day if I only didn't have responsibilities that I needed to take care of, like everything. This and what was supposed to be a whole day set aside with nothing but reading turned out to be a 3-day venture because everything just kept getting in the way, and I'm just like physical therapy, doctor's office, and I'm just like, and stuff around the house and, whew.
I
But, um, yeah. But it wasn't, if I would have been able to, read it in one sitting, I would have to hands down agree with you about that part with the bookstore. Like, oh my gosh, I'm like, that is really where I mean, it caught my interest in the beginning of the story where she, um, where she lays, like you said, the groundwork of the book, but it really, I think, picks up at that point in the bookstore. I'm just like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
you two need to get together and just call it a day. And
yeah.
for the record, anybody who's listening, Sam he works at the bookstore, and Grace, these are the two main characters, Sam and Grace. Uh, Grace is in the bookstore, and she never knows that he is the wolf that is always, watching over her the the woods in her backyard, and she knows the wolf by his yellow eyes, and Sam has the yellow eyes both as a human and as a wolf. Like, the eyes don't change. They get to keep
Nope.
the eyes that they are for human. So that part bugged me. But anyways,
I
that's
genuinely think because she was with Olivia and her other friend. I can't remember her name right now. Yes.
Rachel.
Yes, Rachel. If Olivia had not been like, okay, Grace, let's go, like dragging her from the books because she was like looking through every one, which me, 100%. If she would not have dragged Grace away, she would have seen him. I believe that wholeheartedly.
I was like so giddy at that point. I'm like, come on, Grace, turn your head, look in his direction.
Yep.
You're gonna notice it's your wolf.
But then you also have to be like, Sam, just walk up to her. Like, get from behind the desk and just walk up to her. You know it's her.
And then he's doing his internal monologue, like, should I, shouldn't I? Like, I want her to, but I don't want her to. Like,
And
dude,
yeah,
you're so cute.
we're both screaming at that point, like, yes, do it. Don't say no. Do it.
Right? But yeah, overall, it was definitely a quick read, I think.
Yeah, I cannot wait to get into the second one.
Oh my gosh, me either.
So, moving on, what was your favorite and least favorite scene in the book?
Ooh, I like this one. Okay, so my favorite part is the part where Sam is working at the bookstore and totally crushing on Grace. And then just the inner monologue that he's debating with himself back and forth, it puts a smile on my face. Like, again, make me all giddy. Um, as for my least favorite scene is a scene that I did mention earlier. It is when we learn that Sam is locked up in the shed on Jack's property. Jack is a wolf like Sam. Um, he was, I believe, accidentally bitten. And he's trying to find a cure to return to being human and only human, but um, but he ends up being like, really mean and
Yep.
locks Sam up in the shed. And then see, Grace was bitten when she was younger, but she never turned into a wolf. So he thinks that she's got the cure, and she really doesn't.
Nope.
At least not that she knows of
Yeah, no.
in the book. And so yeah, that's my least favorite scene is when he locks him up in the shed and then takes Grace and tries to get the cure out of her. Like, and he's kind of mean about that in a way too, because he kind of gets aggressive with her. I'm like, dude,
Yep.
there's no need to be aggressive with her. Dang,
She literally had to go into the mindset of like a victim. You saw that like in what she was saying and how she was reacting. She
Right,
was definitely like approaching him like he was her captor and
right,
just like making him hear everything he wanted to hear so she could stay alive long enough to like fight.
right. All
Yeah.
right. So, how about you? What is your favorite scene and your least favorite scene?
My favorite is the same exact as yours. What we just gushed over is him seeing her in the bookstore, and I mean, there's nothing like that scene. I genuinely hope that in the second book, when we read that there's like a scene like that. Obviously, not exactly like that, but a scene that just steals you, just like
Right,
completely entrances you.
right.
For my least favorites, I would have to say it's about I think the middle of the book. They are at Beck's house and they're getting warm and everything and Sam just will not heat up. So the only thing that Grace can think to do is shove him in a hot bath, which, as we'll explain later, is a major trigger for him because of things that his parents did to him as a child. And just the whole scene of him like freaking out and just like, please let me out, and like crying to Grace, like, get me out of here. Like, I cried because I was just like, yes, get him out, but at the same time, shove him in long enough to get him warm so he doesn't turn.
Yeah, for anybody listening to this, in this world that Maggie Stiefvater has created, the wolves, when they're when they're bitten as humans, they will turn into. They're supposed to, anyways. Turn into wolves when it gets cold enough. So, like during the late spring, summer, early fall, they're humans.
Yep.
Like your everyday normal human. They don't turn. They don't turn at night. They don't turn upon anger. The thing that turns them is the cold. The cold temperatures.
And they cannot change back into humans unless it's warm, unless it's the warmer seasons.
Right.
But as it goes on, as they progress in their years, it takes longer. It needs to be warmer for them to change back.
Right, and then it just usually comes to a point where some of the wolves will have like a few human years, and other wolves may have like 20 plus human years. But eventually, they all get to a point where they don't turn back into a human, and they just stay as a wolf.
Yep, I did like the part where they were talking about like moving to Florida or California or something to like avoid the cold. I thought that was an interesting thing that she put in there, but of course, sad to find out that that didn't work. It prolonged
Yeah,
it, but
I
it didn't work.
think Ulrich, one of the members of the pack, had tried to do that. I think he tried to move down to Texas or something,
Something like that.
and it ended up being so much so that it made them more sensitive to temperature.
Any
I'm like, well,
slight change, yep.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, that sucks.
Because instantly when I read that, I was like, okay, move. That's it. Get in the car, move. And then she was like, but it isn't. It doesn't work.
Yeah, like as soon as I read that part with Ulrich and Paul and Beck when they were all talking about that, I'm like, oh man, just ruined my hopes here.
Exactly. Because instantly, the whole time you're reading this, you're just thinking of a way to make it work where they don't have to be separated.
I
Sam and
mean,
Grace. Yep.
I know, I just love those two. They're the main characters of the first book at least, and it's
Yes.
just I just love those two together. All right, so let's move on to the next question. If you could change one thing about the book, what would it be?
So this was really hard for me. I had to sit and really like think like right now what is it that I would change. Like there's not a lot that immediately pops to my head, but the only thing that I would say that I would change is when Olivia got bitten.
Hmm.
Not that she did, but when. Because I think that the author has a lot of room to like kind of grow with that in the next book.
Mhm.
And like something about Olivia, I feel like she is going to be an amazing wolf. But I wish that Jack wasn't the one who did it.
I know. As I said
Like,
before, he's a meanie poo.
he is the biggest Minnie Pooh ever. And I cannot honestly say, as like a Harry Potter lover, if I dislike him more or less than Dolores Umbridge. I think I might dislike him more.
Yeah,
Because
I
he.
don't like Dolores Umbridge either. She just, you know how that nails on a chalkboard feeling? Yeah, that's what she is to me. I'm just like,
She's literally more hated than Voldemort, who's trying to kill the main character through the whole series.
right. All right, so
What? Yeah. What about you? What was your like least favorite, or what's the thing you would change?
the least favorite, my least favorite part, well, not my least favorite part, but
Right.
one of the things I didn't like about the book is specifically related to a character named Beck. He's basically the alpha of the pack, and basically there's a point in the story where Jack basically is the reason why Sam loses his humanity and turns into a wolf. But we'll get into that a little bit further. But in hopes to find a cure for Sam to retain his humanity and never have to turn back into a wolf, Beck sacrifices his own. And when I say sacrifices his own, they you can get a sense of feeling throughout the whole book that this is going to be Beck's last year. He's been a wolf for 20 some years, and he's been turning back and forth for 20 some years, human wolf,
Yep.
and you can get this big sense that this is his last year of being human. And it's just like, and the temperatures are getting colder, so he's limited on the days that he has left. But then he gives what remaining days he has left, so that you know,
So he can lure Sam back to Grace.
right, in hopes of finding a cure.
Yep.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like I really wish he didn't have to, like. I saw a way after we got to the end of the book. I saw a way. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Beck didn't have to do that.
I know. When that was going on, I was just like, but if he could only like run back in the house or something, if there was just a way that he was able to do that. But you have to think because it was his last year and he would have probably he needed to change after he got the shot, we'll call it, because it was his last year, would that have saved him? Because that technically was his end.
Right. See, we don't know. And the thing is, you find out that after a wolf loses his humanity, he may live for maybe only another 15 years, and that's it.
Exactly.
So,
Just heartbreaking.
right?
So, next question. Do you think that the book would work best as a movie, a television series, or a Broadway play?
In my mind, as I was reading the book, I could clearly see it like I'm sitting in a movie theater just watching it on the big screen. Like I can clearly see the whole four-book series being a set of like a movie collection. Like I want to see it on the big screen, and
Yeah.
I don't mean the big screen. I mean the IMAX
Yep.
big screen.
We just want to see those yellow eyes. That's it.
All right, what about you?
For me, I do agree that I could clearly see it as a movie series, but in a weird way, I feel like that has been done too many times. I would rather see it as like a TV series, like a Netflix series almost,
Ooh,
because just like so we could hopefully get more time with Sam and Grace. So hopefully we could have like more of them than just like a 2 hour movie for 4 books.
that's true too. That could really work.
Yeah, I mean, I'd I'd watch it.
All right, so moving on to the next question. Will you share a favorite quote from the book? And of course, why it stood out to you.
Okay, so tear warning, because this just like thinking about it, I want to cry because it's a part of the book where you're meant to cry. My favorite quote is Sam cupped my face in his hands and looked me in the eyes. His eyes were yellow, sad, wolf, mine. These stay the same. Remember that when you look at me. Remember it's me, please.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry.
Exactly. That is for those who haven't read it. That is the moment pretty well near the end of the book that he turns into a wolf. They got into a car accident, him and Grace did, and she was not able to keep him warm and keep him human. And so, right before he turns, this is what he says to her. That favorite quote. Yeah.
Right. And like back, he's one of the wolves that is getting so few like um Beck has like 20 plus years as a wolf and a human, but Sam isn't getting as many years, and they believe that this is Sam's last year of humanity too. So when you see that sacrifice, it's like, oh my gosh. Wow.
And isn't it because he got bitten as a child?
I think so. I think he
Isn't
was one of the youngest that
Yeah.
got bit.
Yeah. Cuz I don't remember if it says when Beck was turned, but I'm pretty sure it like implies that he was turned as an adult.
Right.
So, sad Sammy.
I know. I know.
What is your favorite quote and like why did that stand out to you?
I wouldn't say it's a favorite quote, but the quote that stuck out to me the most was when Sam says he used to watch Grace read books on her tire swing out in the backyard. Even on cold days, he asks her, "Why didn't you read inside?" And what she says to him is this: books are more real when you read them outside. And that stuck out to me because it's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, and for like totally honest with you, but I have never really read a book outside except for the proof copies of my books. When I
Oh
was
my
making sure
goodness.
that quick grammar was all set to go. But yeah, like I'm like, well, now I feel like I've been uh what's the word I'm looking for?
You've been missing out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like I've been missing out. I'm like, you know what? And the sad part about it is we're coming up to winter. It's just around the corner. Like, ugh, no. So I think I'm gonna read the next book outside before the weather gets cold. And yeah,
Yeah. Before snow touches the ground.
right. Yeah, that's what stuck out to me. I'm like, do people really do that?
Oh, yeah. I love reading outside. It's amazing. But I will say, I think it has to be in a certain place, because if you were just sitting on like a sidewalk or something, I don't think it'd be as real to you because there's too much like outside noise. Yeah.
Right, makes sense.
I think like one of my favorite places is like by a park. There's like a little bench and I love to go there and like read. And there's a lake and everything, so it's just like it's setting a perfect scene.
Yeah, see, I've only in my room, in my bed, or in the living room, or at Barnes and Noble,
Oh yes, of course.
or
Yeah.
a library when I was in high school,
Oh yeah.
but never outdoors.
Well, you're missing out. I can't wait to hear about your first reading outdoors experience.
Woohoo! Yeah,
So, what feelings would you say that this book evoked for you? Like,
and
how did
that's a good one. It gave me several different emotions. It gave me hope and eagerness, excitement for when Sam longed to know Grace. This was at the very beginning of the book. And when she longed to know more about her wolf that was always watching her. And I also get this feeling of love and happiness for when Sam and Grace finally kiss for the first time and subtly kind of claim each other as their own. And then I also get anger, like, and frustration for Jack, for what he does to Sam and what he does to Grace. Like, really? I'm like, dude, no, that's not cool. Not cool, man. Um, and then, of course, sadness for when Sam sacrifices his humanity to keep Grace warm.
Yep.
And then, of course, hope and love for the end of the book,
Yeah, of course. Hands down.
right? And what about you?
Purely to emotions, sadness and love. Sadness because they had to be apart for so long. Like, as much as they were together through like almost anything, if you weirdly look back to it. Back to when, like, huge spoiler again, Grace was actually bitten when she was young and Sam was there. And that is when they became infatuated with each other. Because instead of Grace freaking out or screaming for help or anything, all she did was stare into Sam's eyes and, like, touch his fur. And there's just so much sadness because as much as they were together through a lot, they weren't. They missed out on so much. And I almost wish that Grace would have turned. So they would have had that time together.
Right? How about that part where the other wolves of his pack were, you know, gnawing at her? Like he didn't. That's the one part that I didn't like, but at the same time I did. Like I didn't like the fact that he tried to stop his pack, but then again, it was like three or four of them, like going to town on her.
Yeah.
But he didn't bite her, he didn't eat her, but what he did do, and of course he didn't stop it either, but what he did do is he took his muzzle and just put it inside her hand, and it's just like, you know,
Yeah. It's like weirdly touching, but then like why didn't he stop it completely?
right.
But at that time they hadn't kind of had their, I keep wanting to call it, what the heck does imprinting? I keep wanting to call it that because I feel like if that was a thing in this book, that would have been the moment that he imprinted on her.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that that's a Twilight thing, but I'm wondering if that really is a thing with the Shiver series as well, like a weird sort of like imprint.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe we'll find out.
Reading a werewolf book, as anybody who's either read or seen the Twilight movies, you obviously do a lot of comparisons between the two. I don't want to say I like this more than Twilight because I was a huge Twilight person, but I love that they're sticking to kind of like one thing, to just like the werewolves, and it's not like there's no vampires, there's no, like witches or anything like that. Like as of what we know now, like
Right.
it could change moving on.
I hope not.
I hope
I
not
hope
either.
I hope it stays just wolves. It'd be nice to not have witches and vampires for a change.
Yeah, exactly. It's strictly. And I will say one thing that interested me is yes, Beck does appear to be the alpha, but there doesn't seem to be like a real alpha in this world, we'll call it. Like
Right. They all kind of co-lead the pack with each other.
yeah.
It's like they all
Like
have a mutual understanding of what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, except for the part where Becca's all like, homeschooling Sam
mhm,
as he's growing up, and then all the others, the members of the pack, were like, well, what? Why? He's just
mhm.
going to end up a wolf eventually. I mean, well, what's the point of educating him? He's not going to need the education when he turns into a wolf forever, you know.
Yeah,
But
but
it's like, well, if he wants to, he wants to, you
exactly.
know.
And that was a point where he was like, "All right, Sam, if you want to do this, go ahead. I'm not going to like make you do it anymore. It's your choice." And the first thing he does is grab a book. So,
Right. And that's the thing. They just leave it at that. They don't like force each other to do this or not do that. And as far as that kind of thing is concerned, you know. So
and the
yeah.
one part I will say too, now that I've thought about this, one of my least favorite parts is when Shelby grabs, when they're younger, like this is when he was homeschooling, Shelby grabs one of his school books from him and stomps on it and like freaks out at him and is like,
Yeah. It's
why?
so disrespectful. Like, really? Why? What is the point?
Yeah, but she just screams at him and she's like, "You won't need this. You're not gonna know this when you're a wolf." And she just, and that was one of my least favorite parts too. That's the part where I knew I did not like Shelby.
Yeah. Among the other things that she does in the book, like, I mean, she witch.
hmm
All right, so moving on to the next question. What do you think about the book's title? Does it justify the story?
Shiver, yes. Down, down to a lot of things. I think that this is perfect because just the act of shivering for Sam is like so dangerous in this book. Like as soon as that sets in, you worry about him like changing. So I do not think that there would have been a more perfect title for this one.
Right?
It's
I have to
perfect.
say, I have to say for the one, for once in my life, like I read that word shiver, I'm like, no, no,
Yep.
don't say that. I'm like, no,
Exactly.
we're not doing that, you know.
Yep.
Um, so
The
I agree with you 100% as
yeah.
far as the title is concerned. The title really does justify the book,
It will be interesting to see if that theme carries on onto
right?
her other books. I'm excited.
Yay!
So, how did you feel about the ending? Were you satisfied or frustrated?
To be honest, I was both satisfied and frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I was satisfied because of uh, Sam and Grace finally reunite in the end after they think all hope is lost and he's forever to remain a wolf and he doesn't show up for like some time and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, bam!
Mm-hmm.
Kind of I'm a human again, kind of
Yep.
thing. I can say that, but it's kind of obvious. Like it's just like I love that, but
mm-hmm.
that's where it ends. I'm like,
Yep.
really? Like cliffhangers. Love them,
Mm-hmm.
hate them.
Yes.
Yep. What about you?
I have to agree completely. I was both. I was satisfied because like to set the scene a little bit more, as you said, it had been a long time since he had been human, but the way she did it, you didn't actually know he was human, because he talks about hiding behind the trees and looking at her. And I mean, a lot of time when he is a wolf, that is how he talks. That is how he acts. So you do not know until almost the last sentence, when it literally says that he walks out to her and says something to her that he's human. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, really? You're so happy. But then, as you said, it ends right there. And you're like, why? Like, I need more than that.
Y'all could keep me going on here. I mean, come on.
Yeah, like, give me at least one more chapter. Let me know that this isn't a dream.
Right? Speaking of the end, do you think it was the right time or place to end the story? Or do you think that there was more that you felt you wanted to know?
I mean, with this, there is, of course, always more that you want to know. You, like I just said, like, you know, you want one more chapter just to see that it's more real to you. But I do hope that in the next book we get that more that we're searching for. But it's difficult. It was a very good point looking at it from an author's perspective to end it, because you really are waiting. Like, you're setting this point for other readers to be like, okay, I have to pick up the next book.
Right? Exactly. It's
But
like perfect the way it ended. Like, as frustrated as I was with the end, I do think it was a fair ending, and it made me just want to go get the next book like yesterday. I'm like, I need the book like now. Like, seriously.
and I feel like that's the reader part of us. Like, the reader part is the part where we are like, okay, we have to get the next book, but the author point is perfect.
Right? Exactly. It was.
So, moving on, what did you like best about this book?
I would have to say the relationship between Sam and Grace. Just because he's like a guy who watches over her. Basically they're like when she is young, when she gets bit, and he doesn't stop her from being bit, but he doesn't. Basically what he's doing is he's watching her. He's waiting for her to turn, but she never turns into a wolf. And then when he becomes a human, he sees her in the bookstore, and and she's, oh my gosh, it's just like it was a little slow at first, but I think it was timed perfectly because now they're older and a little bit more mature than children. So it's like I think it was I think it was a pretty good relationship between the two. Like, I loved it. That was just like my favorite part of the whole book was watching the relationship
Grow.
evolve.
Yeah. I would have to say definitely uncovering the background of Sam and Grace, not only together but separate, like before they actually got together, was my favorite part. It was just learning. I wanted all the information that I could about like how she was bitten, like who he was. Like, I just wanted it all, and I really enjoyed how she uncovered it all separate and together.
Speaking of how the story was told, how do you feel about how the story was told? Like between the two perspectives of Sam and Grace?
I loved it. I feel again like it was done very well. I wish I don't know if this is because Sam is obviously my favorite character. I wish there was more Sam parts, because I would say in the very beginning it feels a very like Grace heavy.
You know what? I have to agree with you on that. It does feel a little Grace heavy. There were points in the story where it'd be Grace, next chapter Grace,
Grace, yep.
next chapter Grace. I'm like, when are we gonna get to Sam?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
seriously. And then when you finally get to Sam, it's like 2 pages. I'm like, really?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Or like just one little paragraph of his wolf thoughts, and it's like, we need more.
right. Yeah,
Yes.
I have to agree with you on that.
What do you think? Is there any other thing that you feel about how it was told?
I loved, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I love the difference between um, the chapters where you can tell though when you go to the chapter, it's in the heading. You know whose point of view it's gonna be in. Um, it's really interesting. Um, Now, I personally have listened to the audiobook version just to see what it was like, and they had just two voices for the whole thing. It was Sam um and Grace, and obviously because those are the two main
Right.
characters of the book. So, but it was neat listening. Like to me, listening to that audiobook, it felt like it was really them. Like and like I got that little sense of immersion into the into the whole world. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that was so neat. I for those of you that don't know, it is available on Audible. So yeah, so it was awesome, totally awesome. Um, but yeah, I loved the back and forth between the Sam and the Grace, and then I loved it.
It's weird because there's almost, you could say, three points of view. Because there is Grace, but then there's Sam as human and Sam as wolf.
Yeah, that's true too.
And they are different.
Different, yeah, definitely. Another thing that I love about the chapter headings, and I believe that you are in agreement with this, is for each chapter, you can tell what the temperature is. It actually lists the temperature that's part of the scene.
Yep. And it takes place in Minnesota, so woo, homeland.
Yay.
So I was very excited to see that, and I think that she did very well, like with the temperature thing. That was just, as a person who is from Minnesota, it was perfect because like you saw that temperature and you knew how cold it was. Yeah,
Right?
like as a person who's lived like in your neck of the woods, winter is very different here from there. Here, it literally gets colder than it is in Alaska at some points of the in the winter. But I feel like MPA, it doesn't get that cold. There's definitely cold. It's definitely winter, but it's not like seeping in your bones cold. So, moving on, which parts of the book really stood out to you?
I have to say there's a few. The first one that came to mind was Olivia's disappearance after she and Grace apologized to each other over the fight that they had. And and then of course I love every bookstore scene. Like hands down. Maybe because I'm a lover of books and I love bookstores. Maybe I'm a little bit biased in that sense. Um and then another scene that another part of the book that stands out to me is Beck's fatherly type of love for Sam because he rescues. See, Sam underwent um, abuse with his family after I think it was after they found out that he had been bitten and turned into a wolf. And they just do all kinds of things to him. So he basically raises Sam as his, you know, kind of like a son. And just that love that he has for Sam, it's just I love it. I do. I really love it. And then of course, Sam's sacrifice for Grace so that she could save him.
Oh yeah.
So what about you? What are your what is the or what are the parts of the book that stand out to you?
Another thing that stood out to me from what you had said earlier was the temperatures at the beginning of the chapter. That stood out to me in attention to detail. Like
Right?
that small detail I felt had such a huge part in the book. Like it was just literally a temperature at the beginning of each chapter, but it's either sent you in like a tension because you're like, oh my gosh, it's cold. Will Sam be okay? Or it's okay, it's warm. So today it's going to be a happy day or something.
Right, right. And then not only that, but like quite literally, like I could kind of feel the chill. Like I'm like, I
Yep.
just want to curl up under a blanket with a hot cup of hot cocoa with a whole bunch of whipped cream on top.
Yep.
But yeah, like I can literally like feel like I don't know if any of you listeners out there can feel that kind of thing when you're reading a book, but and I don't know about you, Luna, but for
Oh yeah.
me, I can feel that literal chill. Like it's crazy, but it's awesome.
It is. Another scene in particular, kind of going along with the bookstore scene that you said,
Hmm.
is the scene where Sam takes Grace to the bookstore and he shows her a loft. And they sit together, and he has her. This is before she really thinks that there's a whole lot of wolf in her, but he has her sit and close her eyes and just take in everything, the scent, the sound. And he reads to her a poem. Like, that part of the book stood out to me because it was just one of those scenes where you're like, "Aw."
I know,
Like,
I know. And another now that you mentioned the whole part, yeah, he doesn't only have her sniff everything out in the bookstore, but he does it in the candy store too. When he
yep.
takes her to his favorite candy store, and she does the same thing. You can as she's describing all of the detail, there's like, I just want to walk in that candy store right now. Like
Yeah.
I can literally feel like I'm in that candy store. But yeah, that is that scene in the loft in the bookstore. Like I said, I love every single scene with the bookstore in it. Like, I mean, you can't go wrong with the bookstore,
No.
honestly.
No, as long as it's written correctly, I will 100% agree with you. But I really felt that this was like, it was perfect. Like, you felt it. You felt like you were there. Same with the candy store. I felt like I was smelling all the things that she smelled. Like, it was amazing. But the third and final part that stood out to me was the scene where they're in the clinic. So it's him and Grace and Isabel and her brother Jack are in a clinic that Isabel's mom works at.
Olivia,
And
I think Olivia's in that scene too. Did
oh,
you
that's
say?
right. Yes, Olivia. No, I forgot her. I was just thinking about the four. So they were there, and it's her, Isabel, Grace, and Sam in the room, as far as I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. And and he's a wolf, and Isabel is basically like, well, we can't do it to him as a wolf, like it's not right and it won't work.
Right.
And she and Grace sits there and draws Sam into his human form.
Right. Basically, we're going to take a step back for a moment and
Yeah.
explain to you listeners out there. Um, basically, they figured out that the reason why Grace never turned into a wolf is because right after she got bit, like right after,
Yep.
like literally right after she got bitten, I think she was locked in her, she was in her father's car, and it
Yep.
got so hot in the car. And I think she was sick with the flu too.
She had like
Um,
meningitis or something.
right. No, she had the flu,
It was
but
the flu.
but because she was in the car, she had a temperature
Oh, that's right.
that was so high, and it kept her from, you know, activating the wolf gene and turning her into a wolf. Now, in this scene, in the clinic, they're trying to, I think it's Isabel. Yeah, it's
Yep.
Isabel who gets 3 vials of meningitis because
Yep.
her mom was at the clinic, and I guess they were having a couple of patients that were
It was like
having
an
men.
outbreak or something.
Right.
Yep.
And so it's their hope that they can see that as a cure to give Jack and Olivia and Sam the cure.
Yep, because with meningitis, you get a fever so high, and that's the case it was for Grace. Is that her fever was so high that it basically burned the wolf out almost. But that was their hope, I
That's
think.
what we think.
Yeah.
We haven't read the other three books yet, so maybe she will turn into a wolf. I don't know, but it's my hope that um that the meningitis. I hate to say it, but when you see that at the end of the book, Sam is human again. Obviously, it worked, but yeah,
But it's like it worked, but for how long? Was it permanent? Was it only holding it off for so long? Like I don't want her to turn because then I don't want her to be away from Sam if it is permanent. But also I feel like there's almost this part of her that is missing because she never turned.
that's true too. That is true too. Um, and then of course that same scene at the clinic, they are able to inject Jack with the full vial of the meningitis. It's a blood sample, really, a blood
Yeah.
sample that's contaminated with meningitis. Um, but yeah, and he gets the full dose, but he dies from it. But before he dies from it, Olivia says, I don't want the vial. I'm
Yep.
just
She
give
freaks out.
it to Jack. We'll see how Jack does." And then she ends up wanting to just be just let the wolf side come out. And then you're in the middle of they're in the middle of trying to give Sam the injection, but it only goes halfway through before he starts wolfing out.
Yep.
They
Eh,
never get the full dose.
no, which I mean, I think obviously we can tell is perfect that he didn't because Jack passed away. But just that moment stuck with me where he literally phased long enough and he was like, "Give it to me. Just do it before I turn back." That
Right.
that stuck out to me. That was my last one.
All right. So moving on to the next question. Which scene has stuck with you the most?
Besides the ones that we already listed, going kind of deeper into Sam's background, I would say there's this point when they're explaining what his parents like have done to him because when he got it when he was very young, as we said earlier, and his parents freaked out because he would shift back and forth like so much and they thought that he was a freak. They didn't understand it. They didn't know why. And so I think they tried to
I
kill
think
him.
they were possessed.
Yeah.
Or
Like, but I felt like it wasn't clear whether they were trying to kill him or whether they were just trying to see if they could, like, control his change. But they're in the bathroom and each parent takes a wrist and they slit his wrist.
yeah, yeah,
And that stuck with me.
yeah. That's not cool.
No, that was just it was horrific. Like I was not prepared for that because the whole book like is super lovey and everything and then you see like kind of why Sam is who he is, why he's so delicate. It's cuz his parents didn't understand it. So they tortured him because they thought like you said, I think that they thought he was possessed. And that
And
stuck with me.
not cool.
No.
I don't like people like that.
No, you can't. There's no respect. There's no nothing. That's torture. That's evil. Like they're
Yep,
evil for what they did to him, not the other way around.
exactly.
So, but what do you think? What scene stuck with you the most since reading the book?
The two scenes that stuck with me the most is the sacrificed humanity. One with Sam when he sacrifices his humanity for Grace, and then Beck when he sacrifices his humanity in the hope for Sam to have a cure. I mean,
Yeah.
sacrificing your humanity to forever be a wolf where you can't the only communication you have as a wolf is just pictures, just
Yep.
images, but you can't communicate otherwise. Like you're missing out on so much more. You're missing out on the emotions of humanity and the language and communication of humanity. It's just you're missing out on so much. So it's like, while it might be fun to run on all fours and,
Right.
just be one with nature for a little bit. But nah, man, I mean,
And it,
sacrifice humanity.
yeah. And it was
Yep.
love in both cases, I think. Like you had said, the father figure thing for Beck. When he did it for Sam, it was truly out of love. Like he wanted Sam to have a fighting chance.
Right?
And then Sam sacrificing it for Grace so she could be warm and be okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
Right?
So, what do you think surprised you most about the book?
That's a good one. There's three things that surprised me most about the book. Beck, his personality. In the beginning of the book, the way Sam describes him, it's like, you know what? I think I really like this dude. Like, he sounds cool, respectful, a really awesome fatherly type, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But then there comes to a point where it's been so long since Sam has seen him, and when he does finally see him, he realizes that Beck was up in Canada fighting three new people to
Mm-hmm.
bring into the pack, three teenagers into the pack, so that because they need people that are part of the pack that will still be people for a while to protect the property and to protect the house and the woods and stuff, so that they all have a place to go. So
Mm-hmm.
so they needed that kind of thing, but it's just like the way it's presented, you're like, wait a minute, man, like so
Mm-hmm.
soft, like why? And then you find out later on that those three teenagers wanted,
Yep.
they volunteered. And then not only that, but he's not really like that anyways. Like he says in the beginning that he was, like he bit Sam on purpose. And, but then in the end, he turns out to actually be, you know, like you see that back
Yeah.
and forth. You love him, you hate him, you love him. I mean, Um, And then Olivia being bitten, that one kind of surprised me. And then, of course, her refusing to cure at the end. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I get it. I understand where she's coming from. But up until that point, she seemed like she really wanted to be a human.
Yep.
But then she's like, no, 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 I don't want the cure. I don't want it. And then, in the end, she says, just let me be a wolf. Just,
Mm-hmm.
just let me go with it. And it's just like, well, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was good that she didn't. Because
Right?
obviously we saw what happened to Jack. So there's a part of me that was thankful that she didn't do it.
Right, exactly. And then, of course, the third and last scene part that not a scene, but what surprised me about the book was Rachel. Now, Grace and Olivia and Rachel are like the trio of best friends
Mm-hmm.
who go through everything together, but Rachel is the one who's left out of the book. She comes across to you as the high spirited, girl with the boyfriend, and it's just and almost kind of like a Dixie
Mm-hmm.
personality.
Oh, yeah.
But I still feel like she should have been included, but she wasn't. Like
No.
she's one of the few characters that has been left out of the loop. It's like, really? You just gotta drop your best friend like that? Really? Seriously?
Oh, yeah. I feel like she, as much as Grace's parents were very not around and not there, I feel like even Rachel was less, like, even less there. She was in the beginning, and I feel like she was in the end a little bit, but
Right.
she did not have much time at all. Like, I mean, she was just completely forgotten. There wasn't even a whole lot of mention of her.
Right? I mean, who knows? Maybe we're reading into that a little bit too much. Maybe we'll see more of her in the next book.
I hope we do. I do, because I think that she has a lot of potential as well.
Right? All right. So the next question I have for you, and it's actually going to be our last question. If it's a part of a series, did this book compel you to want to read the next one?
I will get to that, but I actually did not answer the previous question.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
I will say that what surprised me was Grace, Isabel, Jack's sister, came to her because Grace had an obsession about the wolves. And Grace swore that, or not Grace, sorry, Isabel swore she saw Jack. But she was like thinking that she was going crazy. So she went up to Grace, who she thought knew more about it. And Grace just lied to her, completely dismissed her. And that surprised me. Like, as it went on, she did kind of give more hints, like, okay, like, come talk to me after school and we'll figure this out. But it took Isabel, like, getting in Grace's face. Like, I know you know, so tell me, because this is my brother.
Right? I agree. I agree 100%.
That surprised me. And then the other part that surprised me was Grace's parents being like weirdly accepting of Sam when they actually found out about him. Like, I think this kind of goes back into the fact that they are such laid back. Like, I wouldn't even call them parents genuinely, because it is explained in the book that Grace, you know, she cooks the meals, she does the bills, she has to go out and get her own car. Like, they're very absentee, but it surprised me how accepting they were of him. Like, they're just like, oh yeah, welcome. Like, no, that's not right.
I think that after she has been bitten once, but not once, but I think she got scratched by
Yep.
the she-wolf, Shelby.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that after two encounters with a wolf that they would be, a little more protective of her and stuff, but no, it's all like chill, laid back, and it's just like, really?
Yeah, it wasn't right. And I mean, there is one part of the book after she goes to the hospital after the Grace, after she goes to the hospital after the accident where they only found her and not Sam, where her mom tries to step in, where
Oh,
she's like, "Oh, you're like, are you okay? Maybe this isn't what's best and stuff." But then Grace is just like, you've been gone for so long that you kind of don't have a say. And it was just like, I felt it, obviously she didn't have a right, but seeing that small sliver of hope, like maybe there was a part of her mother that really wanted to be there but couldn't.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
She,
huge.
I feel like she didn't know how to really connect
No, no, she
with
didn't.
Grace.
And that's another reason why I don't like them. Like, that's why they were my least favorite characters, her parents. Because it felt like there was no trying. Yes, there was that one part in the hospital where her mother kind of, like, was cared less about herself and it was about Grace for, like, 2 seconds. But then afterwards, she disappears again. It's like, come on. Like, your daughter has almost died twice now.
Right?
What is it gonna take? Is it gonna take maybe in the next book we don't know her disappearing? What would happen there? Would they even notice? Will they notice? Who knows? We haven't read it yet.
Right? Right? Absolutely.
But for the last question, if it is a part of a series, did it compel you to read the next one? It did. It compelled me very much. I will be 1,000% honest. After I finished the first one, I read the first 2 chapters of the next one. I didn't get a lot of information from it, but I had to continue.
Absolutely. The first two chapters of the second book are included at the end of the first one. So you're like, oh, whoopee, yay!
And you just have to like keep reading because of the cliffhanger she left it on. You had
Right?
to continue.
Like you have a cliffhanger, you have to know what's next.
Yes, you do. And we will be the ones who tell you what happens next. We are not
Ab-
sure when, but we are definitely reviewing the next one. We have to.
Absolutely. And I say again, one of my favorite parts about this whole book is that there's no vampires, no witches, just wolves and humanity.
Yes.
It's different, and then not only that, like I said, the whole the wolves get triggered by temperature. As soon as it's cold enough, they get triggered into a wolf. No, no werewolf. We're not talking werewolves. They just go from human to wolf. That's it.
Yep. It
And then they
is. Sorry to cut you off. It is interesting that the in between. I did notice that he was talking, Sam, when he turned into a human, he was talking about not having like his human thoughts yet. He was still in like a wolf brain mode. And that was interesting that there is like a weird process of the in between. From what we know, humans to wolves, immediately they're good. Like immediately they switch into wolf mode, but the other part of the transition, like there's a process to it.
right, right. That's like intense. Like yeah, that part stood out to me too in a way. Um, and then the thing I love is their eyes. Their eyes, they get to, like Jack, I think he has blue eyes or hazel eyes, one of the two.
I think
And
it's blue. Yeah.
he keeps his eyes as a wolf. He's like, so like to find out like Sam was born with those yellow eyes, like a decade before he was bit, it's like, how can he be born with those? I mean, it's fictional,
But in my head, that just means that like his destiny was to become the wolf.
right?
Yes. But we will leave it on that. A very amazing conversation with you.
Yeah, so we're good. You can
Yeah.
tell we had a lot of spoilers, but honestly, it is a book that I could read again and again. And I probably will once I have the whole series. I'll probably reread it again. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you. That is all the time we have for today. We cannot wait to have you join us on next week's conversation at the Flow of Ink.
And we appreciate you and every one of you. We hope to see you join us for next week's episode where we will discuss pantsers versus plotters. It is a theme that ties very specifically to authors and the writing process. So, yeah.
I'm excited for that. If you guys have any questions for us, please drop them in the comment below and we will address it in our Q&A portion at the beginning of next week's episode.
Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon and subscribe to our channel so that you get notified for every episode we post. Again, thank you so much for joining us here at The Flow of Ink, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Ciao.
Bye-bye.